I still have about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I have an hour. I have an hour until my interview, and so I figured I'd do a watch now. So, or a watch later. Watch it now. So today's video to watch is the Russian cannibal experiment. So I could just imagine, this is brought to you in part by the infographic show. It's a channel that I like to watch every so often just to get informed of random topics. They do it behind a cartoon wall, so you see like these almost paper animated characters as you see here, and then they kind of reenact what's going on and explain it to you as it goes. It's very informative, hence why they call it the infographic show. And certain ones just kind of catch my attention, so we're watching it here with you.
1933, a group of Soviet prisoners were sent to Nazinsky Island in Siberia as part of a wide-scale Kremlin-backed experiment. They proceeded to live through one of the most brutal and horrific experiences imaginable, with many of them succumbing to the most inhumane fate a person can befall. Our researchers reluctantly looked through reports and archives to discover the truth behind the Russian Canabal Island experiment. It all started when the Soviet Union decided to reinstate the dreaded passport system of Tsarist Russia in 1932. In the past, passports were used to move within Russia, and since they
we're doing that now in America,
especially peasants, they were generally
with our
used to keep people
real
confined to their area of the country.
like driver's
when the
license.
passport system was initially abolished in 1917, loads of peasants went flocking to the cities for work opportunities, overburdening the Soviet urban areas and resulting in housing shortages and crowded conditions. Thus, Stalin reintroduced
which is happening in California,
I think, mopping up operations in the USSR cities to expel all the peasants who, overnight, found themselves living there illegally. This soon led to an overflow of prisoners held within the Soviet Union's infamous
just say homeless
system.
people.
Genrich Yagata, the leader of the collectivization campaign at the time, thought he could ease the overcrowding of the gulags and help Russia by conducting a little experiment. Prisoners would be sent to the remote reaches of Siberia to farm the land there. The assignment would serve the dual purpose of punishing the prisoners while providing food for the nation. To fulfill his vision and conduct his Siberian experiment,
you gave him jobs.
Police to rapidly increase the number of arrests. To be clear, since this
is the
Soviet era we're talking about,
condemned him to slavery. That's like saying you're homeless, you are now our slave.
People were apprehended while stepping out for
which they could have handled it better.
Simply because
it's like, hey, you're homeless. You can't just be homeless on the streets.
To their homes and check. Even the head of the Moscow
we have a system in place.
Arrested in the raids, but
we can give you this job.
It always has its perks. He was released and reassigned to his old position by high-ranking relatives almost immediately. Soon, pretty much any urban resident who so much as went out to get some milk without a passport was locked away. When these non-passport holders were rounded up, they were mixed with dangerous criminals, prisoners, and anyone the state.
Imagine going to the store to get some milk and then being arrested for not having your driver's license. Excuse me, do you know why I pulled you over? Not really. Well, let me see your driver's license. I don't have it on me. Sorry. You're sharing a cell with John Wayne Gacy.
Deemed an anti-Soviet element. This resulted in a total of over 2.
That's people, man. I'm sorry, but like, why? How people? The crime doesn't fit the punishment. The punishment doesn't fit the crime. Oh! I left them in my work pants. You're going to jail, bitch. Justice. It's like that TikTok meme, or that Parks and Rec scene where it's like, not making your dentist appointment, you go to jail. Not wearing a shirt in an establishment that requires you to wear shirts, straight to jail. Overcook your fish, straight to jail. Undercooked your chicken, straight to jail. See the over under. So it's just kind of like that, where they're forcing people into slavery without actually saying that's what it is, which that's exactly what it is for the most mundane things. Russia still kind of boggles my mind, because I have to assume that stuff like this is still sort of happening over there. I know it's happening in North Korea, but I mean, it's 2023 almost, so we should be running towards the end of having to witness stuff like this. But Unfortunately, we just keep going through the motions over and over again.
Prisoners, all of whom were shuttled off to Siberia together.
I don't even know what to say about that anymore.
Totally, completely viable dream of coaxing food for an entire nation out of one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. On the journey to Siberia, this mix of prisoners created
off to Siberia you go.
A terrifying atmosphere. Ordinary citizens were held with some of the most violent criminals in the country.
Get over there, you piece of scum! You forgot your passport? Get over there with the murderer. What you just did is the equivalent to murder. Oh, you had it in your other pocket? Okay. Oh, thank you. Well, this checks out. You have yourself a nice, wonderful day. You know what I mean?
Assaulted and even killed by them.
Yeah, fucking killed by a murderer in jail for not having your... What you in for?
1933,
My papers.
men were put in timber barges, kept below deck, and given meager portions of bread to complete the 497-mile downriver journey to Nazinski Island on the River Alb. Surprisingly, only 23 of them died on the worst river cruise in the world. This tiny uninhabited island, located near the town of Nazino, was supposed to be their temporary home until the authorities could find labor camps able to accept the prisoners, but it quickly became a permanent hell instead. Nazinski was a swampy, mostly flat strip of land that measured about 1.9 miles long and about a third of a mile wide. Though the theoretical point of all this was for the prisoners to farm the land, they were given no tools, no food, and no shelter, and no clothing. If you are already seeing the problem here, congratulations, because the Soviet authorities didn't. The men and women on the island spent their...
Start making some corn. With what? You bitch! You son of a bitch! Stop talking back! Now you! Trim the hedges! What hedges, sir? Yeah! That's a metaphor for fucking life. Do something that you can't do, or else I'm gonna punish you.
Their first night in Siberia wearing whatever they had...
How about don't do something that you shouldn't be doing, and then we punish you.
Been detained in while walking around in cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, then known as Leningrad. For most, this clothing was not nearly sufficient enough for outdoor living and sleeping in Siberia. Now, some people might be thinking, it was May. How bad could conditions be even in Siberia?
Yeah, you sleep outside one day and see how that goes.
First night, 295 prisoners froze to death in their sleep. The second night, the wind started howling and the temperature dropped below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The people on the island searched for bark and moss to chew on to alleviate their ever-growing hunger while making fires in a feeble attempt to keep from freezing. On the fourth day, the guards were generous enough to provide the prisoners with a few hundred grams of rye flour per person. The ration should have been in the form of bread, but at some point the guards realized making flour into bread was work, and they'd rather not do more than what was required of them. So the island's new residents rushed to the river to mix up their newly received rye flour with water in their hats to make, hopefully, some kind of edible porridge. The situation only deteriorated from there, as though sleeping outdoors in Siberia and eating flour mush out of their hats wasn't already bad enough. For those wondering why the prisoners wouldn't try to escape this island in these horrid conditions, well, they definitely tried, but they faced near insurmountable odds on their way out. First of all, crossing the River Ob in freezing temperatures while starving and exhausted was a near impossible task. Second, the island's guards made a sport out of torturing and killing the prisoners. They would beat them with rifle butts, rape them, and engage in all sorts of brutality. The island itself was also
like the actual crimes that are actually happening are going unpunished, while random, and like, let's be honest, I guess the true criminals are actually surviving in this, like the everyday, the Joe Schmo who actually just kind of forgot his passport in his front pocket the other day, doesn't deserve to be there. He probably just walked out of his house thinking it was going to be a normal day, and bang, bing pot, he got called out. But the true crime, the true ferocity, right, goes unpunished, unchecked.
By machine gun carrying soldiers who would shoot anyone trying to flee. After some time, these conditions led to the unthinkable.
Murder is okay.
And exhausted, the prisoners
having a piece of paper in your... Oh god, they started cannibalizing each other.
Were the first to cross the line into cannibalism.
Yep, the criminals.
As early as the 10th day of isolation on the island. Before we describe these incidents in detail, perhaps it would be best to make sure your stomach is settled and you put down any food you're in the middle of eating.
Oh, it's gonna get bad, isn't it?
Away altogether for the rest of the day. Shocking accounts first started pouring out of residents from the nearby town of Nazino. One 13 13-year-old girl, who we hope received plenty of therapy later in life, recalled how a guard named Kostya Venikov fell in love with a beautiful young girl on the island. Fair warning,
She's
the
13,
story
by the
does
way.
not have a Hallmark ending. Kostya protected her as much as he could, but one day he had to leave the island, and a group of people grabbed her, tied her to a tree, and stabbed her repeatedly. The gang then started eating all the parts of the girl that they could stomach. By the time Kostya returned, it was too late. She was still alive, but had lost too much blood for him to save her. This little girl who observed this added, all over the island one could see human flesh being ripped, cut, and hung on trees. The clearings were littered with corpses. Some villagers encountered victims of cannibalism who made it out alive. One of them, a woman named Theofilia Bailina, gave an account of a female prisoner coming out of Nazinski. Or, as she tells it, once a woman from the Island of Death was brought to our house. Along with the nickname Cannibal Island, the charming moniker Island of Death was frequently used by locals to describe this super successful everything's gonna be great here Soviet island experiment. The woman was taken to the back room to spend the night, and I saw her calves had been cut off. I asked her, she said, they did that to me on the Island of Death. Cut them off and cooked them. All the meat on her calves was cut away. Her legs were freezing because of this, and she wrapped them with rags. She was able to move on her own. These stories started to leak to government officials and the local Russian population to the point where they could no longer be completely ignored. In July 1933, a local communist instructor named Vasily Velichko was sent to the camp, ostensibly to report on the successful resettlement of these declassed elements of the Soviet society, but realistically to check out how many of those rumors coming out of Nazinski
are true.
What he found was akin to
if one of them is true,
the overall
you stop it.
Of the camp. He noted immediately after the snow and frost came the rains and freezing winds, proving that even during summer in Siberia you really can't catch a break, and the people were still left without food. The rye flour brought to the prisoners often ended up suffocating them in their weakened state, just from breathing it in. As though dying from trying to eat wasn't that enough, many died from trying to stay warm as well. Velichko reported they burned to death alive while sleeping close to the fires. They died from exhaustion and cold. After dozens of no doubt traumatizing interviews, he wrote up an 11-page report and sent it off to Moscow. The officials who viewed the report found it so shocking that they sent a special commission to confirm Velichko's findings. The commission found 31...
Okay, people have been saying that people are killing themselves or eating each other in this island. You send people to confirm this. They confirm this. Not only confirm it, but they say they point out how much worse it actually is. And you send more people? No, that can't be true. That's... Yo, you lost the plot, my dudes. That's all I can see for this, because... What's the ending? Let's just watch the ending.
50 to 70 corpses. The facts of the case now confirmed, the Kremlin took action by immediately stamping Velichko's report top secret and
cover it up.
far, far away from the general population. To be fair, they also did prosecute more than 80 prisoners and guards for cannibalism, as well as looting and assault. But the Kremlin went to great lengths to hide the truth of Cannibal Island from the public. Like all awful secrets, the report eventually came to light in 1994. That's right.
During the first episode of Friends.
So long that by the time it came out, Friends had just premiered. However, the truth of the events on Nazinski Island had already been shared with the public in the late 1980s during the downfall of the USSR. Now, back in 1933, Moscow thanked Velichko for his investigative work by firing him and kicking him out of the Communist Party. He eventually ended up
as you do. When somebody points to you all the flaws of your establishment, in lieu of trying to help you, you should fire him instantly.
Journalists through World War II and beyond, yet never revisit.
If you have a burning house and somebody calls you and lets you know that it's burning, you should shoot that guy in the face for even daring to tell you the truth.
Visited the tragedy of Cannibal Island in his writings. By August 1933, Nazinski Island.
If someone's trying to rob your mother from her social security checks, you should be kicked in the balls for even thinking about telling the government that this is happening to your poor mother, your old decrepit 80-year-old mother trying to survive, and somebody's trying to take all her life savings. Fuck you for trying to put some light on the horridness that is what people can do, and essentially showing everybody that you're not doing your job right. Right? Isn't it? You're not doing your job right. Fuck you! Off to jail. I need to finish the story because I have a job interview in 20 minutes.
Island had been emptied out. Of the original 6,700 prisoners, only 2,200 survived. Of those 2,200, only 300 were considered healthy and fit enough to work. Prisoners who survived the horrifying island conditions eventually gave accounts of their own engagement in cannibalism. One man named Uglov claimed that he never ate human meat, just livers and hearts, which one might argue is the definition of splitting hairs. He continued, I picked those who were not quite living, but not quite dead. It was obvious that they were about to go, that in a day or two they'd give.
Yeah, because you were able, you're a physician that can make that decision.
So it was easier for them that way. Now, quickly, without suffering for another 2 or 3 days. Though the horror of Cannibal Island experiment occurred generations ago, the locals have never forgotten the atrocities that took place there. In 1993, they erected a wooden cross on the island, and every year a small group of people
that's
from
20
the
years
nearby
ago.
city of Tomsk, 342 miles away, nearby is relative.
That's a millennial ago.
In Siberia, we guess, they travel to Nazinsky Island and place a wreath on it. The wreath serves as a gesture of remembrance for all the victims whose lives were claimed by this cruel experiment, and as a bit of a resistance to current Russian minimalization of Stalin's atrocities. The tragic events on Nazinsky Island took place over a period of 13
during
weeks,
Stalin's
without food, shelter, or warmth, subjected to constant violence and threats.
reign.
The prisoners' de-evolution into cannibalism happened swiftly and shockingly. Though the USSR has tried to cover up these crimes, the locals of Nazino never forget and want to make sure this horrific experiment is.
Yeah, trauma doesn't go away. Like, that's the thing, is that people want to be like, oh, listen, let's just forget that it all happened. You never forget. When something bad happens to you, it sticks with you, and there's only one way to make it tolerable, and that's engaging in it and acknowledging it that it happened. For you as a government entity to gaslight your civilians, it's disgusting. Like, nothing good can come from that. Like,
not forgotten. Have you heard of the Russian Cannibal Island experiment before? Now that you've finished watching this video and you'd like to clear your mind of all these images related to the story, check out this video right here.
Right, like even watching this video, you're kind of scarred for life. Anyways, that's my reaction to this video. Do better, governments. That's all I can say after watching this one. Anyways, that's been this episode of Watch Later, Watch Now. Watch Now, Watch Laters. Still haven't figured out the name of the show, of this segment. But thanks for watching. If you have been watching, as always, peace.